My name is Maya Brooks. I am 26 years old. Last Thursday, I stood in a chilly wood-paneled boardroom and watched my entire family pop champagne over a $40 million inheritance while I was handed a single rusted iron key attached to a piece of cardboard. My brother Julian laughed so hard his face turned bright red, clapping my father on the back. My stepmother sighed with a dramatic, theatrical pity, murmuring something about fairness under her breath. The attorney wouldn't look me in the eye. He just slid the key across the polished mahogany table like he was passing a piece of trash. To them, I was the family mistake, the quiet one, the girl who dropped out of their prestigious Ivy League track to run a struggling, dusty plant nursery on the edge of town. They had already spent their millions in their heads before my grandfather's body was even in the ground. They thought that rusted key was the ultimate final cosmic joke, proof that Grandfather Arthur had written me off just like they did. But here is the truth that none of them knew. Not my arrogant brother, not my icy stepmother, and certainly not my father with his millions and his country club memberships. They didn't know what kind of lock that rusted key actually opened. They didn't realize that when you push the family scapegoat too far, she might just open a door that ruins all of them. Before I tell you exactly what happened when I turned that key, take a quick second to hit like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely love a good story. Go ahead and drop your city and local time in the comments below. I honestly love reading where you guys are tuning in from. Now, let me take you back to last Monday morning, the day the world cracked open. The phone rang at exactly 5:42 a.m. I know the exact minute because the glare of my screen lit up the darkness of my small bedroom above the nursery greenhouse. It was my father, Richard Brooks. He doesn't call me. Ever. If my phone rings with his caller ID, it means someone is either dead or needs a massive favor. Maya. His voice came through the line, clipped, cold, and entirely devoid of emotion. Your grandfather passed away at midnight. The formal reading of the estate is tomorrow at 1 p.m. sharp. Modern law offices downtown. Wear something that doesn't smell like fertilizer. He hung up before the words could even process in my brain. No, how are you holding up? No, are you okay? Just a corporate directive. I sat up in bed, pressing my cold hands against my face. Outside, the morning fog was heavy over the glass panels of the greenhouse. Grandfather Arthur was gone. He was 85, a brutal self-made titan who had built Brooks Industrial Shipping from a single, leased river barge in 1978 into a logistics empire that practically controlled the supply lines of the entire Midwest. He was a terrifying man to most, but to me, he was the man who had calluses on his palms and dirt under his fingernails. He was the only person who understood why I loved watching things grow. While the rest of the family was busy pretending to be royalty, Grandfather Arthur used to steal away to my nursery on Sunday afternoons. He would sit on an overturned plastic crate, drink cheap black coffee from a thermos, and help me propagate rare orchids. The world is full of people who want to tear things down, Maya, he had told me just a few months ago, his voice raspy but fierce. You have the gift of keeping things alive. Don't ever let them take that from you. I took a deep breath, got out of bed, and got ready to face the vultures. When I pulled up to my grandfather's massive estate in the historic district of the city, the driveway was already blocked. My brother Julian's brand new Porsche was parked crookedly across the grass. He never could respect a boundary, even a literal one. Through the grand floor-to-ceiling windows of the sitting room, I could see my stepmother, Evelyn, already gesturing wildly to an appraiser, pointing at a massive 19th century oil painting above the mantelpiece. They hadn't even buried him yet, and they were already inventorying the art. My father met me in the foyer. He looked over his tailored gray suit, then looked down at my dark green dress. It was neat, but it wasn't designer. "Try to keep your mouth shut today, Maya," he whispered, leaning in so the household staff couldn't hear. "The lawyers have spent the last 48 hours organizing the corporate transition. Julian is taking over the board. We don't need any dramatic scenes from you about your childhood." I didn't say a word. I just walked past him. I knew exactly where I stood with them. My mind flashed back to last Thanksgiving. It was the last time the whole family had sat together at the grand dining table, 14 people eating off sterling silver. My father had stood up to do his annual family recap, which was basically just a corporate shareholder meeting disguised as a holiday toast. "Julian has officially secured the logistics contract for the entire tri-state region," my father had beamed, raising his crystal glass. A true visionary, following right in his grandfather's footsteps. The table erupted into applause. Julian smirked, leaning back in his chair like a king. And Maya, my stepmother Evelyn, had chimed in, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She paused, waiting for the ambient chatter to die down so everyone could hear the punchline. Maya is still operating her little plant boutique, selling ferns to college students. It's adorable, really. It keeps her busy. A ripple of suppressed, polite snickers traveled down the length of the table. I kept my eyes glued to my plate, my throat burning. But from the far end of the table, Grandfather Arthur had slammed his heavy hand down. The silver rattled. The laughter instantly died. "She runs a business," Arthur growled, his fierce blue eyes locked onto my father. "She manages overhead, she handles suppliers, and she works 14-hour days with her own damn hands. That's more than I can say for half the executives sitting in my boardroom right now." Evelyn had waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, Arthur, don't indulge her. If she wanted a real career, she would have finished her MBA." Arthur hadn't said another word that night. But later, when I was packing up my car to leave, he had walked out to the gravel driveway. He put his heavy, rough hand on my shoulder. "They don't see the long game, Maya," he had whispered. "They think power is something you inherit in a board meeting. They're wrong. Power is something you build from the dirt up. I've taken care of it." I didn't understand what he meant then. I really wish I had. Tuesday at 1 p.m., the boardroom at Modern Law offices felt like an iceberg. Julian arrived with a team of 2 personal junior attorneys, their leather briefcases snapping open in unison. Evelyn was draped in a black silk wrap that looked more suited for a fashion show than a funeral. My father sat at the center of the table, completely motionless, exuding the quiet arrogance of a man who believed he already owned the room. When I walked in and took a seat at the very edge of the table, Julian didn't even look up from his tablet. "Surprised you made it," he muttered, scrolling through a document. "Don't worry, I'm sure there's an old lawnmower or a tractor in the estate garage with your name on it." Evelyn chuckled softly, adjusting her diamond earrings. "Be nice, Julian. I'm sure your grandfather left her a lovely piece of sentimental jewelry. A brooch, perhaps." The door clicked open, and David Vance, the lead estate attorney, walked in. He looked exhausted. His tie was slightly askew, and he carried a single thick manila folder. He didn't offer any pleasantries. He simply sat down, put on his reading glasses, and cleared his dry throat. "We are here to execute the final will and testament of Arthur Thomas Brooks," Vance began, his voice echoing in the stark room. The reading went exactly how my family had engineered it to go. My father received the primary residential estate, the luxury vehicles, and a lump sum of $12 million. He didn't smile. He just nodded, his chest swelling with pride. Julian was formally awarded 45% of the voting shares in Brooks Industrial Shipping, alongside a $10 million liquid portfolio. He immediately slammed his tablet down and grinned at my father. They had won. The corporate empire was theirs. Evelyn received the winter estate in Palm Beach and the remaining cash reserves, totaling roughly $8 million. Vance turned the page. The atmosphere in the room changed. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. And finally, Vance read, his voice dropping an octave, to my granddaughter, Maya Elizabeth Brooks. Every single face turned toward me. Julian leaned forward, a mocking smirk plastered across his lips. Vance reached into the folder. He didn't pull out a check. He didn't pull out a property deed. He pulled out a small, heavy, rusted iron key attached to a faded piece of gray cardboard by a piece of twine. He slid it across the table. It made a sharp scraping sound against the mahogany. On the cardboard, in my grandfather's thick, unmistakable black marker, were the words, "The Old Tool Shed. Grid 4. Use it when you're ready." That was it. No money, no corporate shares, no real estate, just a piece of junk. The silence lasted for about 3 seconds before Julian absolutely lost it. He burst out laughing, a loud, booming sound that echoed off the glass walls. "A key!" Julian gasped, clutching his stomach. He left her a rusted key to a shed full of broken shovels. Oh man, grandfather really knew how to weed out the dead weight. Evelyn hid her smirk behind a manicured hand. "Well, Maya, you always did love the dirt. I suppose he thought you could use some extra tools for your little backyard garden." My father just stared at me, his eyes cold and entirely empty. "He gave you exactly what you earned, Maya. Nothing." I didn't say a single word. I picked up the heavy iron key, wrapped my fingers around the cold metal, and walked out of the room. But as I stood in the parking lot, my hands began to shake violently. It wasn't from sadness. It was from a sudden, blinding realization. Grid 4 wasn't a location on the family estate. Grid 4 was the internal shipping code for the main industrial shipyard downtown, the massive, restricted logistics hub where Brooks Shipping kept its entire fleet. I got into my old truck, shoved the key into my pocket, and started the engine. I need to pause the story right here for just 1 second, because that moment, standing in that pristine, sterile parking lot with a rusted key burning a hole in my pocket, was the exact line between my old life and what came next. If you have ever been looked down upon by the people who were supposed to protect you, if you've ever been made to feel small by your own blood, then you know exactly how much fire was burning in my chest right then. Hit that subscribe button right now if you want to see exactly how this key unlocked their worst nightmare. And let me know in the comments, have you ever been completely counted out only to prove everyone wrong? That very evening, my family celebrated. They didn't even wait for the weekend. My father threw an extravagant victory dinner at the Grand Estate House, inviting the entire corporate board of Brooks Shipping. They didn't invite me, of course, but Aunt Clara, my mother's sister, who had always stayed out of the family politics, texted me from the bathroom. "They're giving Julian the formal CEO title tonight. Your father is already drinking Arthur's private reserve wine. They're talking about liquidating your grandfather's old warehouse assets tomorrow morning." When I read that text, I knew I couldn't wait until morning. I drove downtown through a pouring rainstorm. The neon lights of the industrial district blurred against my windshield. I pulled up to Grid 4, the massive, high-security gate of the primary Brooks shipping terminal. The chain-link fence was 12 feet high, topped with razor wire. The security guard, an older man named Hank, who had worked for my grandfather for 30 years, stepped out of the booth, shining a flashlight into my truck. "Miss Maya?" Hank blinked, surprised. "What are you doing down here this late? Your brother Julian called earlier. He said your security clearance was being revoked first thing tomorrow morning." "I know, Hank," I said, stepping out of the truck into the rain. I pulled out the rusted iron key with the faded gray cardboard tag. "Grandfather left me this. He said it was for the old tool shed in Grid 4. Is that shed still standing?" Hank looked at the key. His jaw dropped. His flashlight beam wavered. That's not a tool shed, Miss Maya," Hank whispered, his voice suddenly trembling. "That's the key to the original Master Archive vault. It's located inside the old brick boiler building behind Warehouse 2. Nobody's been allowed inside there since 1995. Your grandfather kept the only copy of that key on his personal keychain. My heart hammered against my ribs. Take me there, Hank. We walked through the dark, cavernous maze of shipping containers, our boots splashing in the deep puddles. The rain was relentless. At the far back of the yard stood a small, weathered brick structure covered in creeping ivy. It looked completely abandoned. Hank unlocked the heavy outer padlock of the building, letting me inside, then stood guard at the entrance. "I'll give you 20 minutes, kid. If your dad finds out I let you in here, I'm done." Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old paper, oil, and dust. In the center of the concrete floor sat a massive floor-to-ceiling iron vault door. It looked like something out of an old bank. Right in the middle of the heavy iron wheel was a single, tiny, unpolished keyhole. My hands shook as I pushed the rusted key into the lock. It resisted for a second, stiff with age. I forced it. The heavy internal tumblers thrown back with a deep, echoing metallic thud. I grabbed the iron wheel and spun it. The massive door groaned open, revealing a small, brightly lit room. It wasn't full of old tools. It was full of meticulously organized ledger boxes, legal binders, and a single, pristine black leather suitcase sitting on a small wooden table. I walked over to the table and opened the suitcase. Inside were two things: a thick, notarized legal contract and a handwritten letter addressed directly to me. I grabbed the letter first, my vision blurring with tears, as I recognized Grandfather Arthur's sharp, heavy block letters. "Maya, if you are reading this, it means you had the courage to come here despite the humiliation your father and brother undoubtedly put you through. I knew they would try to take the company. I knew they would look at my will and think they had won. They don't know anything about business. They think a company is built on stocks and titles. They forgot that in 2012, when your father nearly bankrupted this empire with his horrific real estate investments, I privately restructured the entire corporate hierarchy. I placed 55% of the holding company's actual voting control into a blind private entity called the Orchid Trust. The will they read today only handles my personal public shares. The contract beneath this letter gives you 100% ownership of the Orchid Trust. You don't just have a seat at their table, Maya. You own the table, the chairs, and the building they're sitting in. But there is one more thing. Look at the ledger labeled Project Phoenix in the box behind you. Your father and brother have been embezzling from the operational logistics funds to cover their personal trading debts for the last 5 years. I didn't stop them because I was waiting for the right person to hold the leash. That person is you. Do what needs to be done. Protect what we built. Love, Grandfather. I stood in the silent vault, the breath completely knocked out of my lungs. $38 million in corporate control, full legal leverage over the entire shipping empire, and absolute undeniable proof of my family's criminal fraud. They thought I was the punchline, but Grandfather had given me the entire script. The next morning at exactly 9 a.m., the main conference room at Brooks Industrial Shipping was packed. My father and Julian were sitting at the head of the table, flanked by their corporate lawyers, preparing to sign the official paperwork to liquidate the warehouse assets and finalize Julian's appointment as CEO. The heavy glass doors swung open. I walked in wearing my mud-stained work boots, a simple pair of jeans, and a dark green jacket. Behind me walked David Vance, the estate attorney from yesterday, but he wasn't looking tired anymore. He was carrying a massive leather briefcase and looking exceptionally sharp. Julian slammed his pen down, a look of pure disgust crossing his face. "Are you kidding me? Maya, I told security to bar you from the property. You don't belong here. Go back to your weeds." My father stood up, his face dark with anger. "Maya, leave now before I have you forcibly removed. This is a private executive meeting." I didn't say a word. I walked straight to the head of the table, pulled out Grandfather Arthur's old wooden chair, the one my father was about to sit in, and sat right down. David Vance stepped forward, opening his briefcase and sliding 3 thick, notarized documents right in front of my father and brother. "What is this garbage?" Julian sneered, picking up the top page. His eyes scanned the header. Then his face went completely, utterly blank. The smirk melted off his lips so fast it looked painful. "This," David Vance said, his voice ringing through the silent room, "is the formal activation of the Orchid Trust. As of midnight last night, Miss Maya Brooks holds 55% majority voting control over Brooks Industrial Shipping and all subsidiary entities. Your appointments are currently frozen pending a full executive audit." "This is impossible," my father roared, his hands slamming onto the table as he stood up. "The will left the shares to us. This is a fake. Arthur was old. He was losing his mind." "Grandfather wasn't losing his mind, Dad," I said, my voice incredibly quiet, completely level. I leaned forward, looking into his panicked eyes. "But you certainly lost yours when you started moving corporate funds into your offshore trading accounts to cover your real estate losses. The full ledgers from Project Phoenix were delivered to the Federal Regulatory Board at 8 o'clock this morning." Julian sank back into his chair, his face the exact color of ash. He looked like he was about to vomit. The 2 junior attorneys he had hired yesterday silently began packing up their briefcases, stepping away from the table. They knew a sinking ship when they saw one. My father looked around the room, realizing that every single board member was now looking at me. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and sudden, pathetic desperation. "Maya," he stammered, his voice cracking, We're family. We can talk about this. We can manage this together." I picked up the rusted iron key from the table, spun it around my finger once, and slipped it into my pocket. "The meeting is adjourned," I said. "Julian, pack up your desk. Dad, your legal counsel will be contacting you by noon. Oh, and by the way, I'm changing the locks." I stood up and walked out of that boardroom, leaving the silence behind me. For 26 years, they had made me feel like I was nothing but dirt. They forgot that dirt is exactly where things grow. Thank you so much for listening to my story today.